Part 1. The grand amphitheater on Varelli's Prime sat silent under the pale glow of twin moons. Inside, the air hummed with tension. Delegates from over 200 star systems had gathered for the Galactic Concordance Summit, hoping to end decades of border skirmishes and trade disputes. But one delegation was missing. The humans had left without warning. Counselor Kale Vor of the Zintari hegemony stood near the empty human observation pod, his four-fingered hands clasped behind his back. His silver robes shimmered in the low light, but his face was grim. He had watched the human envoy, Captain Daniel Hayes, walk out just hours before. No explanation. No farewell. Just a quiet nod and then silence. Now the pod stood dark, its screens blank, its seats empty. It felt like a tomb. Around him, whispers spread through the chamber like smoke. The Veln collective delegates muttered about human unpredictability. The Cerelian ambassadors exchanged nervous glances. Even the usually calm Ulan observers shifted in their gel-filled chairs. No one knew what the humans would do next. That was the problem. For all their technology, their ships, their science, the humans remained a mystery to most of the galaxy. They spoke plainly, acted quickly, and never begged for favor. And now they were gone. Back aboard the Earth Alliance cruiser, Aurora's Resolve, orbiting far beyond the moon's sensor range, Captain Hayes sat alone in his ready room. The ship was dark except for the soft blue glow of his console. On the screen before him, encrypted reports scrolled slowly. One after another, they told the same story. Cathari Dominion patrols were moving deeper into neutral zones. Their ships carried weapons not listed in any treaty. Worse, they'd attacked a human science outpost near the Helios Rift, killing 12 researchers, and claimed it was accidental. The Council had called it a regrettable misunderstanding. Hayes called it war. He rubbed his temples. He had tried to warn them. At the summit, he'd presented sensor logs, intercepted comms, even wreckage analysis. But the Council dismissed it all. Human emotions color your judgment, High Arbiter N'Zoth had said, his voice dripping with polite condescension. The Cathari are honorable. They seek peace as we all do. Hayes had wanted to laugh or scream. Instead, he stood up, thanked them for their time, and walked out. He knew then that words wouldn't work. Not anymore. On Earth, President Lisa Monroe sat in the underground command center beneath Geneva. The room was cool and quiet, lit only by the soft hum of holographic displays. Around her, advisors waited in silence. She had just finished a secure call with Hayes. His message was clear. Diplomacy had failed. The galaxy saw humanity as loud, impulsive, even childish. They didn't understand that human patience had limits. And those limits had been crossed. Monroe turned to her chief of staff. "Initiate Protocol Nightfall," she said, her voice steady. The order rippled through Earth's networks within seconds. Across the solar system, human vessels began powering down their public transponders. Relay stations switched to encrypted channels. Trade ships rerouted. Military bases went silent. To the rest of the galaxy, it looked like humanity had vanished. Back on Varelli's Prime, confusion turned to concern. The Council tried hailing Earth. No response. They contacted human embassies on neutral worlds. Empty. Even the small human trade office on Xylos Station had locked its doors and gone dark. Counselor Vor requested an emergency session. "This is not a tantrum," he told the assembled delegates. "This is a withdrawal, and if we do not understand why, we may lose them forever." But many didn't listen. The Veln collective argued that humans were overreacting. The Cerelians suggested they were staging a dramatic exit to gain leverage. Only a few, like Vor, sensed the truth. Humanity wasn't playing games. They had given the galaxy a chance, and the galaxy had ignored them. Meanwhile, on the edge of the Sol system, engineer Chris Dawson worked late in a Martian dry dock. His hands moved quickly over the hull of an old freighter, the Marlin. He wasn't supposed to be there. Officially, the ship was decommissioned. Unofficially, it was part of a quiet project known only as Shadow Veil. Beside him, linguist Maya Ellis checked the ship's comms array. "Stealth shielding's holding," she said, her voice low. "We can disappear for weeks if we need to." Dawson nodded. "Good. Because if the Cathari think we're out of the picture, they'll get bold. And bold gets people killed." Ellis looked up at the stars through the dry dock's transparent dome. "Do you think they'll come looking for us?" "Not yet," Dawson replied. "They think we're just angry. They don't realize we're already moving." Far away on a quiet farm in Iowa, Retired pilot Jake Rivera watched the news feeds with growing unease. He saw the empty seats at the summit. He saw the silence from EarthGov. He knew that silence meant something big was coming. He hadn't flown in years, but he kept his flight suit in the closet just in case his people needed him again. Aboard the Aurora's Resolve, Captain Hayes finally stood up. He walked to the viewport and stared out at the stars. He thought of the researchers lost at Helios Rift. He thought of the lies the Council had swallowed. And he thought of the quiet strength of his people, farmers, teachers, engineers, soldiers, who never asked for glory, only fairness. "We gave them peace," he said softly, "to no one but the void. Now they'll learn what happens when we stop offering it." The ship turned slowly, its engines humming to life. It vanished into the black, leaving no trail, no signal, no trace. To the galaxy, humanity had gone silent, but in the shadows they were already preparing. Not for war, not yet, but for truth. And sometimes truth required silence first. The Council still believed they held the power. They thought humanity would return, tail between legs, begging to be heard. They were wrong. Humans didn't beg. They acted, and now, while the galaxy debated and doubted, humanity had already made its next move. Quietly, efficiently, irrevocably. The stars watched and waited. Part 2. Weeks passed with no word from humanity. The silence stretched like a thin wire across the galaxy, humming with unease. Trade routes that once flowed smoothly began to stutter. Human-built relay stations, once the backbone of interstellar communication, fell dark without warning. Ships from a dozen species drifted in confusion near empty docking bays, waiting for clearance that never came. The Galactic Council scrambled to fill the gaps, but they quickly realized how much they had relied on human systems. Navigation grids flickered. Supply chains broke. Even medical shipments from Earth's biolabs stopped arriving. Panic, quiet at first, started to grow. On the frontier world of Helios Reach, dust swirled through the abandoned streets of Port Marlow. Once a bustling hub for traders and engineers, it now felt like a ghost town. But deep inside Hangar 7, hidden behind layers of false walls and signal dampeners, two humans worked in secret. Chris Dawson wiped grease from his brow as he adjusted the power couplings on an old freighter. Maya Ellis sat cross-legged on the floor, her fingers flying over a handheld scanner calibrating the ship's stealth shielding. They hadn't slept in 30 hours, but neither cared. Time was running out. "They're getting bolder," Maya said, not looking up. "Cathari patrols doubled near the Orion Spur last week, and they're using new jamming tech, human-made but modified." Dawson grunted. "Stolen, more like. Or reverse-engineered from wreckage they shouldn't have had." He tightened a bolt with a worn wrench. "Earth's not talking, but we're still watching. And if they think the galaxy's blind now, they're in for a surprise." Outside, the wind howled through rusted scaffolding. Helios Reach had been neutral ground once. Now it was a shadow zone, unclaimed, unmonitored, perfect for quiet work. The freighter they were fixing, the Marlin, was part of Operation Shadow Veil, a contingency plan drawn up years ago when Earth first suspected the Council was being misled. The idea was simple. If diplomacy failed, vanish. Not to hide, but to see. To move unseen while the galaxy stumbled in the dark. Back on Varelli's Prime, Counselor Cale Vore paced the marble halls of the summit spire. His aides brought him reports every hour. Trade delays, communication blackouts, rising unrest among minor species who depended on human aid. He had warned them. He had told the Council that dismissing humanity was a mistake. Now he watched his warnings come true, one silent day at a time. A Zintari scout vessel had picked up strange energy readings near the edge of Sol system. Brief, faint pulses that vanished before they could be traced. Vore believed it was human activity. Others called it sensor ghosts or solar flares. But Vore knew better. Humans didn't leave ghosts. They left plans. On Earth, President Lisa Monroe stood on the roof of the Geneva Command Center at dawn. The city below was quiet, but the sky was alive with satellites and silent drones. She had not slept much since Protocol Nightfall began. Every day brought new intelligence, Cathari ships probing human borders, Veln envoys spreading rumors that Earth was collapsing from within. Even old allies like the Cerellians asking if humanity had retreated into isolationism. She knew the truth. They hadn't retreated. They were repositioning. In a hidden lunar shipyard beneath the Sea of Tranquility, Captain Daniel Hayes oversaw the final checks on a new class of corvette, small, fast, and built for silence. These weren't warships, not yet. They were eyes, ears, hands in the dark. Earth was preparing to fight the galaxy. It was preparing to protect itself from those who used the galaxy as cover. Meanwhile, on Mars, civilian pilot Jake Rivera received a coded message on an old military frequency. It was just 3 words: ready the wings. He didn't hesitate. He packed a duffel bag, kissed his daughter goodbye, and walked out into the red dust. He didn't know where he was going, only that his skills were needed again. That was enough. The council, still gathered on Varelli's Prime, held emergency debates that led nowhere. The Veln Collective insisted humanity was bluffing. They'll return when they realize how much they need us, Arbiter and Zoth declared. But Vor shook his head. You misunderstand them, he said. They don't need us. They chose to work with us. There's a difference. His words fell on deaf ears. The council voted to send a formal inquiry to Earth, a polite note asking for clarification. It was never answered. Not because Earth ignored it, but because the message never reached its destination. Human deep space relays had been rerouted. The galaxy's voice, once loud and certain, now echoed into emptiness. On a distant ice moon near Proxima Centauri, a Cathari listening post hummed with activity. Inside, Dominion officers reviewed intercepted data, fragments of human chatter encrypted but not untraceable. They believed they were watching a civilization in retreat. What they didn't know was that every signal they caught was a lure, a trail left on purpose. Earth's intelligence division had turned their silence into a weapon. Let the Cathari think they were winning. Let them grow careless. Back in Hangar 7, Maya Ellis finally leaned back, satisfied. Shielding stable. We can run dark for 6 weeks if we stay off active sensors. Dawson nodded, wiping his hands on a rag. Good, because we've got a job to do. There's a mining colony out near Series 9 that hasn't checked in. Officially, it's on maintenance lockdown. Unofficially, I don't trust official anymore. Maya looked at him. You think the Cathari hit them? I think we won't know unless we go look. They loaded supplies in silence. No fanfare, no orders from above. Just 2 humans doing what needed to be done. That was the heart of Earth's strategy now, not grand declarations, but quiet action. While the galaxy waited for a speech, humanity was already moving. Far above, in the cold void between stars, the Aurora's resolve drifted near a dead comet. Captain Hayes watched a live feed from Helios Reach. He saw Dawson and Ellis board the Marlin. He didn't send a message. He didn't need to. They knew their role. And he trusted them completely. The galaxy thought silence meant weakness. But humans knew better. Sometimes the loudest statement was made by saying nothing at all. And in that silence, they were building something new. Not a wall, but a net. One that would catch the truth no matter how deep it hid. The stars burned on, indifferent. But down below, on forgotten worlds and hidden docks, humans worked in the shadows. Not out of fear, but out of duty. And soon, the galaxy would learn the difference. Part 3. The distress call came from Series 9 like a scream in the dark. It was short, broken, and filled with static, but the message was clear. Cathari raiders had struck the mining colony without warning. They burned the comms tower, disabled the defense grid, and took hostages from the hydroponics dome. The call ended with a child's voice whispering, "Please, someone help." Then silence. The Galactic Council received the signal but hesitated. Series 9 was in a disputed zone, and sending ships could be seen as provocation. They called an emergency session to debate jurisdiction. While they argued, no one moved. But someone else heard the call. Deep in the asteroid belt, hidden behind a tumbling rock the size of a city block, the Marlin powered up its engines. Chris Dawson's hands were steady on the controls. Maya Ellis monitored long-range scans, her eyes sharp. They had been watching Series 9 for days, suspecting trouble. Now they knew. "We're not waiting for permission," Dawson said. "No," Maya replied. "We never were." The freighter slipped out of hiding, its stealth shielding bending light and sensor waves around it like water around a stone. It moved fast, silent and unseen. Behind them, 3 other human vessels. Small corvettes from the lunar shipyard followed at a distance, all running dark. This wasn't a rescue mission. Not officially. But humans didn't need official reasons to do what was right. By the time they reached Series 9, The Cathari raiders were loading stolen ore processors onto their assault skiffs. They thought they were alone. They were wrong. Without warning, plasma fire lit up the void. The lead Cathari ship exploded in a flash of orange and black. The second tried to flee but was cut down by precise railgun rounds from a corvette that seemed to appear from nowhere. The third ship raised its weapons, but before it could fire, its engines went dark. An EMP pulse, clean and surgical, had fried its systems. Within 3 minutes, the raid was over. No human ship broadcast its name. No voice hailed the Cathari survivors. The human vessels simply hovered for a moment, scanning the colony for life signs, then vanished back into the belt as quickly as they'd come. To the Cathari, it felt like being struck by ghosts. On Series 9, colonists emerged from hiding, stunned. They saw the wreckage of enemy ships, the untouched supply depots, and the quiet hum of restored power in their dome. No one knew who had saved them. But they knew who hadn't. News of the attack and the mysterious rescue spread fast. Independent news feeds picked it up first, then trade networks, then even the Council's own channels. Everyone asked the same question. Who were those ships? Analysis of debris told the story. The railgun slugs matched old Earth Alliance specs. The EMP design was human. The tactics, fast, clean, no unnecessary damage, were unmistakable. But these were models the humans had supposedly retired decades ago. Why were they using outdated gear? And why no identification? Aboard the Aurora's Resolve, Captain Daniel Hayes watched the reports come in. He allowed himself a small nod. Operation Iron Bloom had begun. The goal wasn't to win a battle. It was to show the galaxy two things. First, that the Cathari were not acting alone, and second, that humanity was still watching, even in silence. Back on Varelli's Prime, Counselor Kyle Vor demanded answers. He presented the debris analysis to the full council. "These are not rogue raiders," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "This is coordinated aggression, and the humans just proved it." But High Arbiter and Zoth of the Veln Collective waved it off. "Old weapons do not prove Dominion involvement. Anyone could have copied human designs," Vor stared at him. "Anyone, or just the ones who've been stealing them for years?" The chamber fell quiet. No one dared answer. On Earth, President Lisa Monroe reviewed footage from Series 9. She saw the colonists hugging their children. She saw the scorched Cathari insignia on a broken hull. She knew the time for shadows was ending. Soon the truth would need a voice. Meanwhile, Jake Rivera prepared for his mission. He stood in a dimly lit briefing room on Phobos, listening to final instructions. His target was a Cathari listening post near Proxima Centauri, a relay station that had been intercepting and altering diplomatic messages for months. Intel suggested it held proof of Dominion manipulation. Jake's job was simple. Get in, get the data, get out. No combat unless necessary. Speed was everything. He checked his gear one last time. A compact breather mask, a neural scrambler to bypass security locks, and a small data spike, no bigger than his thumb, designed to copy every file on the station's mainframe in under 10 seconds. He didn't carry a weapon. His best defense was silence. That night, he boarded a modified courier drone, tiny, fast, and nearly invisible to radar. It shot out of Mars' orbit like a whisper, heading for the edge of known space. While Jake traveled, the galaxy buzzed with rumors. Some said the Ghost Fleet was a myth. Others claimed it was a new human splinter group. A few even suggested it was a Council false flag operation. But on 100 worlds, ordinary people began to wonder, if the humans were gone, who was protecting the innocent? On Helios Reach, Dawson and Ellis returned to Hangar 7. They were tired, but their work wasn't done. They uploaded everything they'd recorded at Series 9 to a secure channel. Within hours, it would be in the hands of independent journalists, neutral scientists, and species the Council had ignored for too long. Maya looked at Chris. "They'll come after us now." "The Cathari, maybe even the Council," he nodded. "Let them try. We're not hiding anymore. We're showing them what silence really means." Far away, near Proxima Centauri, Jake's drone slowed as it approached the listening post. It looked like a dead satellite, dull, inactive, forgotten. But his sensors told a different story. Power signatures, heat leaks, active comms arrays. It was very much alive. He took a deep breath. Then he detached from the drone and drifted toward the airlock, moving like a shadow against the stars. Inside the Aurora's Resolve, Captain Hayes stood at the viewport once more. He didn't know if Jake would succeed. He didn't know if the galaxy would finally listen. But he knew one thing for certain. Humanity had stopped asking to be believed. Now they were making the galaxy see, and sometimes seeing began with a single act of courage in the dark. Part 4. Jake Rivera moved through the Cathari listening post like a breath of cold air. The corridors were narrow, lit by flickering red strips and empty except for the hum of machinery. He kept his movements slow, his boots magnetized to the deck to avoid drifting. Every second counted. The station's rotation created a weak artificial gravity, just enough to walk without floating. Good. Floating made noise. He reached the central data core after 20 minutes of careful navigation. The door was sealed with a biometric lock, retina and pulse. But Jake wasn't alone. Back on Phobos, a team of Earth cyber specialists had spent weeks studying Cathari security patterns. They'd sent him a sequence, a series of timed pulses that mimicked a senior officer's biosignature. It was risky, but it worked. The door hissed open. Inside, rows of glowing data crystals pulsed softly. Jake didn't waste time. He pulled the data spike from his belt and slotted it into the main port. A tiny light blinked green. Copying began. 10 seconds. That's all he needed. But on the third second, an alarm blared, not loud but sharp. Internal breach. Someone had noticed. Jake didn't panic. He yanked the spike free, already full, and turned toward the exit. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Heavy, armored. He ducked into a maintenance shaft just as two Cathari guards rounded the corner. Their weapons raised. He crawled through the tight space, heart pounding until he reached an outer access panel. With a quick twist of his multi-tool, it popped open. Cold vacuum waited beyond. He activated his suit seals, took one breath, and pushed out into space. The drone was right where he'd left it, hovering in the station's blind spot. He grabbed the tether, pulled himself in, and fired the thrusters before the Cathari could lock onto him. Behind him, search beams swept the darkness. But the drone was small, dark, and fast. Within minutes, it was gone. Back on Phobos, the data spike was plugged into a secure terminal before Jake even removed his helmet. Analysts worked through the night. What they found shocked them. The Cathari hadn't just been spying. They'd been rewriting messages. Human peace overtures to the Council had been altered to sound aggressive. Neutral species requests for joint patrols had been deleted. Worst of all, the Cathari had forged logs showing human ships attacking Dominion outposts, attacks that never happened, and the Council had believed every word. President Lisa Monroe read the full report at dawn. Her face was calm, but her hands trembled slightly. This wasn't just deception. It was sabotage. The Cathari had spent years painting humanity as the enemy while posing as peacemakers, and the Council, blinded by bias, had played right into their hands. She made a decision. The data wouldn't go to the Council first. It would go to the people. Within hours, encrypted copies were sent to independent news networks across the galaxy, the ones not controlled by major powers. Reporters on Xylos, Cyrelia, even deep in Velm space received the files. At first, many were skeptical, but the evidence was solid. Timestamps, encryption keys, voice modulations. Experts confirmed it. The Cathari had lied, and the Council had failed to check. Public outrage spread like fire. On a dozen worlds, citizens gathered in plazas demanding answers. Minor species that had long felt ignored by the Council now questioned everything. Why had their warnings about Cathari movements been dismissed? Why had human reports been labeled emotional while Dominion claims were taken as fact? The trust that held the concordance together began to crack. Councillor Cale Vore stood before the full assembly, holding a datapad with the evidence displayed. "This is not just about humans," he said, his voice low but firm. "This is about truth, and we ignored it because it came from a source we did not respect." High Arbiter N'Zoth tried to defend the Council's actions. "We acted on the best information available," he said. "No," Vore replied. "You acted on the information you wanted to believe. There's a difference." For the first time, other councillors nodded in agreement. Even some from the Velm Collective looked uneasy. The proof was too clear, too damning. Meanwhile, Captain Daniel Hayes received a message from Earth. It was simple. Release the Series 9 footage. Full spectrum. He understood. The Ghost Fleet rescue had been a hint. Now it was time for clarity. The Aurora's resolve transmitted the unedited sensor logs from the Series 9 engagement, showing Cathari ships bearing Dominion fleet codes, using stolen human tech and targeting civilians. The footage spread faster than anyone expected. On Mars, Jake Rivera watched the news feeds from a quiet cafe in New Ares City. He saw alien faces, Zintari, Cerelli, even Ulan expressing shame, anger, and regret. He saw human faces too, not triumphant but weary. They hadn't wanted this. They'd only wanted to be heard. Back on Earth, President Monroe prepared to speak. Not in a closed Senate session. Not through diplomats, but lived to the entire galaxy. She stood in a simple room with a plain backdrop. No flags, no podium. Just her and the truth. "We didn't leave because we gave up," she said, her voice calm but strong. "We left because you stopped listening. You called us loud when we warned you. You called us paranoid when we showed you proof. You chose to believe our enemies over us. Not because the evidence was stronger, but because it was easier. We are not perfect. But we have always told the truth. And now you see what happens when truth is ignored." Her words reached every corner of known space. Some dismissed them as propaganda, but most listened, really listened. On Varelli's Prime, Counselor Vor requested a private channel to Earth. When it opened, he didn't speak as a counselor. He spoke as one being to another. "We were wrong," he said simply. "Will you give us a chance to make it right?" Monroe's reply came hours later. "Not for you. For the galaxy. But on our terms. Those terms would be hard. Full transparency. Shared intelligence. Joint oversight. No more backroom deals. No more biased judgments. Humanity wouldn't return as a supplicant. They would return as equals. Or not at all." In Hangar 7 on Helios Reach, Chris Dawson and Maya Ellis watched the broadcast together. When it ended, Maya sighed. "Do you think they'll agree?" Dawson looked out at the stars. "They don't have a choice anymore. The truth's out. And you can't unsee it." Far away, near the edge of Sol system, the Aurora's resolve powered up its engines. It wasn't hiding anymore. It was waiting. Not for war, but for change. And for the first time in a long time, the galaxy was ready to listen. Part 5. The emergency session of the Galactic Council did not take place on Varelli's Prime. It did not happen in the Grand Amphitheater, with its polished stone and echoing voices. Instead, it was held aboard the neutral vessel, Tranquil Dawn, a wide, slow-moving diplomatic ship that floated in high orbit above Earth. The choice was deliberate. Humanity would not come to them. They would come to humanity. Delegates from over 200 systems filed into the observation lounge, their robes and uniforms bright against the soft blue curve of Earth below. Many had never seen the planet with their own eyes. From up here, it looked fragile, swirled with white clouds, deep oceans, and green landmasses, quiet, alive, nothing like the image of aggressive, loud humans the Cathari had painted for years. President Lisa Monroe entered last. She wore a simple dark suit, no medals, no insignia. Beside her walked Captain Daniel Hayes, his posture calm, his eyes scanning the room not with suspicion, but with quiet readiness. They took their seats at the center table. No raised platform, no special lighting. Just equals finally. Counselor Cale Vor rose first. He did not speak as a representative of the Zintari hegemony. He spoke as himself. "We were wrong," he said, his voice clear and steady. "We dismissed your warnings because we did not understand your way of speaking. We mistook your honesty for anger, your urgency for threat. For that we apologize, not as a formality but as a promise to do better." A murmur moved through the room. Apologies were rare in galactic politics, real ones even rarer. High Arbiter and Zoth of the Velm Collective stood next. His face was unreadable, but his words carried weight. "The Cathari Dominion has been expelled from the Concordance. Their actions violated every principle we claim to uphold. We will support full sanctions, intelligence sharing, and joint patrols along all contested borders, and we accept your terms for renewed cooperation." Monroe nodded. She did not smile. She did not gloat. "Good," she said. "Then let's begin." What followed was not a grand ceremony but hard work. Hour after hour, species negotiated new protocols. Human engineers sat with Zintari technicians to rebuild shared relay networks with open-source code. Cerelian diplomats worked with Earth's legal team to draft a new charter that required all evidence to be verified by 3 neutral parties before judgment. Even former skeptics asked questions, not to challenge but to understand. Outside the conference room, Maya Ellis stood by the viewport, watching Earth turn slowly below. She had been invited as a civilian advisor, representing the quiet work done in places like Hangar 7. A Zintari delegate approached her, hesitant. "Your stealth shielding," he said. "It bends light without energy distortion." "How?" She smiled faintly. "We'll show you. If you show us your long-range sensor arrays." "Fair trade." He nodded, relief in his eyes. Trust, it seemed, could start with a single question. On Mars, Jake Rivera walked through New Ares City with his daughter. The streets were busy again. Human ships were retu, running to trade lanes. Alien freighters docked openly at orbital stations. The fear was gone. In its place was something new, curiosity. A Cerellian child pointed at Jake's old flight patch and asked what it meant. He knelt and explained. The child's parent thanked him with a bow. Back aboard the Tranquil Dawn, the final document was signed. The revised Concordance Charter. It included full transparency in intelligence, equal representation in security decisions, and a new clause. No species could be judged based on cultural bias. It also created a joint task force, humans, Zintari, Cerellian, Ulan, and others, to monitor frontier zones together. The Cathari Dominion, now isolated and facing rebellion from within, had already begun surrender negotiations. As the signing ended, Monroe stepped onto the main deck. Delegates gathered around, not as rulers but as witnesses. She looked out at Earth one last time before speaking. "We didn't leave to punish you," she said. "We left to show you what silence feels like. Because sometimes you only hear the truth when the noise stops." No one clapped. They didn't need to. The weight of her words settled over them like morning light. Later, as the Tranquil Dawn prepared to depart, Captain Hayes stood alone in the observation lounge. Counselor Vore joined him. For a long time they said nothing. "Just watch the planet below. Will you trust us again?" Vore finally asked. Hayes didn't look at him. "Trust isn't given. It's earned. Every day. Starting now." Vore nodded. "Then we will earn it." Down on Earth, in a small town in Iowa, Jake Rivera tucked his daughter into bed. She asked if the stars were safe now. He told her they were safer, but not safe enough. "That's why people like us keep watching," he said. In Geneva, President Monroe closed her office door for the night. The crisis was over, but the work had just begun. She knew the galaxy would make mistakes again. So would humanity. But now they would make them together, with eyes open, not closed. On the edge of the solar system, the Aurora's resolve powered down its weapons array. It remained on patrol, but its mission had changed. No longer hiding, no longer striking from shadows. Now it flew with its lights on, its name clear, its purpose shared. And in Hangar 7 on Helios Reach, Chris Dawson and Maya Ellis loaded supplies onto the Marlin one last time. This trip wasn't secret, it was official. They were delivering medical kits to a Veln colony hit by a recent quake. A small act, but it was a start. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. Humanity's withdrawal wasn't weakness, it was a mirror. And in that mirror they saw their own arrogance, their own blindness. Now they chose to look again, not with suspicion but with respect. Stars burned on, indifferent as ever. But down below, among the ships and cities and quiet farms, beings from 100 worlds began to listen. Really listen. And in that listening, something new took root. Not peace as the absence of war, but peace as the presence of trust. It would take time. It would take work. But for the first time in a long time, it was possible, and that was enough.